Hi there, Will here. And last week I went on a trip out to the Northern Cape with my dad, a place I've never been before, but was very excited to have the opportunity to go to because my dad wanted to go see what the flowers would look like around there. I say would look like because the flowers come in spring and we're in autumn now, headed into winter unfortunately, but an opportunity to go observe some new landscapes is something that I'd never really pass up, and my dad being a geologist, we'd probably go look at some interesting rocks, which we did. After about 5 hours on the tar road and an hour driving on a dirt road and then 20 minutes off on some random path that isn't on a map because it's a path into a farmer's land, we ran into the farmer, and he was walking his goats down the road, and he said, oh, we want to look around and see what the landscape has to offer, and that my dad was interested in rocks. And with moderate amusement, the farmer said that we were of course welcome to drive up and around and see what we could find, and thus we found ourselves pretty much in the middle of nowhere, in an area that I reckon few people have ever visited, mainly because it's actually quite unpleasant around there, but the scope and the spectacle of the landscapes around us were just unparalleled. I'd never seen anything like it, and we found ourselves at the foot of this gigantic monolith of a granite boulder thing that just stretched up as far as the eye could see. And my dad, of course, decided that we needed to walk up the hill next to us and find out what was on the other side. And we did. If you've been around on the channel for a while, there's a video I made a while ago called Mamiya RB67 River Hike, and in that video I said there was no way I'm ever taking my RB on a hike ever again. And that hike, there was at least a path, whereas where we found ourselves now, it was straight bushveld trekking through bushes and snakes, and there was a rabbit, or a hare probably rather, this size that jumped out from the underbrush as I walked past. And I of course decided that maybe there was something life-changing on the other side of this hill, and that I needed to take my RB67, my Mamiya 7, my Panasonic GH5 video camera, 2 tripods, audio recorders, and all my bells and whistles along for this hike, irrespective of past experience, and I came to regret it. But anyway, once we'd reached the top of the initial hill, my dad realized that his map, which is of course a crucial part to trekking around the bushveld, had been left in the car. So I put my bags down and went all the way down the hill again and got lost along the way, which was actually quite scary because being in the middle of nowhere in the bushveld with very little point of reference besides big rocks around, was slightly disconcerting, but I found my way back to the car and then back to him at the top of the hill, and we continued wandering around. It was at that point that I filmed the little "There Will Be Blood" homage reference bit that introduced this video, which I hope people got, because it was a lot of effort to set that whole thing up and like download the video to watch in the moment and try and time things right. But anyway, I filmed that and then made a photograph. And then we wandered that frickin' hill for like 3 hours, and the whole way, once we reached the cusp from the farm, was downhill with this monolith on our left. And the whole way down, tracking through bush felt like thick underbrush and no paths, none of that. I was just thinking, we're gonna have to go up this again on the way out, and it's already quite unpleasant with this silly camera setup I've got. But when the time came, it ended up not being as intense as I'd expected. And this whole time, my dad, who's like semi-retired now as a geologist and is just interested in looking at stuff, is motoring on ahead with his geological hammer thing and smacking rocks and collecting rock samples for his own interest and putting them in a backpack. So he's essentially carrying around a heavy hammer and a backpack full of rocks, and he's just smoking me the whole way ahead. And he's substantially older than me, so I feel like I might need to get fit next time I go on a trip with him. Anyway, we made our way back to the car and survived, and then I made a couple more photographs. And then we drove back to the motel that we were staying in, which seemingly had been in the exact same state since the 1980s. I should have photographed it more and even made some more videos, but I made this one of the outside, which doesn't give much context, but just picture an 80s motel in rural South Africa, and that's pretty much what it was. And after about 15 minutes of sitting around the hotel, we went out for dinner. And as soon as we sat down, I realized that the light was about to disappear behind the mountains, and that I'd have to make a mad dash for some photographs, which I of course did. I didn't video much of it, but just picture me like frantically running around in my dad's bucky or truck, trying to find the last light. And I made this photograph of this like petrol station, which isn't the quintessential gas station photograph, but when I set up the shot, it had that last little red stripe was just being illuminated by the light, and it was perfect. And by the time I'd like actuated the shutter, it was gone, unfortunately. But I got this, which is a nice enough photograph in its own right. And then some sunset landscape shots. And then we headed back to the motel. I made some self-portraits there, but I made them on black and white film, and I still haven't developed the roll, so at some point those will pop up most likely. The next day, I woke up at 5 a.m. and realized that I was awake before the light, which of course meant that I had to drag myself out of bed, hop in the car, and go chase the light. And it was well worth it because I got some really cool photographs. I made this one of a house with a singular light on, just as the light was sort of not coming over the mountain, but lighting up the landscape slightly. And then I drove on, sort of off into the bush, and saw this scene with the road meandering through it and the bushveld in the foreground. And I decided that I needed to wait for a car to drive that road and make a long exposure where you could see the taillights of the car. And I did. It ended up being quite overexposed, and I had to wait around for like 5 minutes for a car to actually show up. But I'm glad I made it. It didn't turn out exactly as anticipated, but it is somewhat of a success, and as a landscape it's still quite nice. And then I made this photograph of a memorial cross on the side of this tiny dirt road where someone had obviously come to some misfortune at some point, with the haze behind the mountain just peaking. And it's probably my favorite photograph from the whole trip. there's a lot going on, and it all sits quite nicely within the frame. Anyway, thereafter, we drove back to Cape Town. We were meant to be gone for 3 days, but ended up seeing all we really needed to see within the first afternoon. So we drove back at 8 the next morning. That was a really special trip. I seldom get to go on trips like that with my dad, and I actually bought the video camera I'm recording this on in anticipation of going on some trips like this with him in the future. And there are a couple more that are going to come up. But it was well worth it, and makes me very excited for what might be to come. My favorite photographs, I don't think there are favorite photographs, they're all just kind of memorializing a brief trip, but an adventurous one out with my dad, dragging me along some mountain, which I did a lot in my childhood because he was still a professor at the university here in geology then, and I'd go on excursions with him and he'd drag me up some rock to go look at rocks, and it was quite special, and I'm glad I did it, and I look forward to more. And hopefully, if there are more, I can make more landscapes like this, because these are probably the strongest landscapes I've ever managed to make, and I'm very glad to have made them, and I hope you enjoy them. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And a thank you to the members of my Buy Me a Coffee for making this possible. There's a very big trip that I'm trying to plan for when winter comes and the photographic season is officially over, so that I have time to do things besides work, where I want to travel a decent portion of South Africa alone, just sleeping in the back of a car maybe. And that's going to have been made possible when the time comes by my Buy Me a Coffee members. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon. I think next week might be the first week in a year and a half where there's not going to be a video uploaded, because I'm going to be on a week-long trip, a work trip kind of, with my friend Kent, and hopefully I'll bring back some wonderful photographs, but it means there won't be a video, unfortunately. I'll see you soon.